If you want to practice all of the new PTE questions using artificial intelligence on an online portal that has a similar marking to your real PTE exam, head over to masterpte.com.au to create a free account. Here, you can practice all 4 sections separately and receive instant feedback for all of your speaking, writing, reading, and listening. You can also view and compare your answers with others who have already succeeded in achieving a high score. Download 9090 Band's template for speaking, writing, and listening. Take mock test, receive instant result, overall feedback, and in-depth analysis which helps you pinpoint exactly where you lose points. masterpte.com.au, the best PTE practice software in the world.
Mars is only about 1/2 the diameter of Earth, but both planets have roughly the same amount of dry land surface area. This is because over 2/3 of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans, whereas the present surface of Mars has no liquid water. Mars and Earth are very different planets when it comes to temperature, size, and atmosphere, but geologic processes on the 2 planets are surprisingly similar. On Mars, we see volcanoes, canyons, and impact basins much like the ones we see on Earth. Many of the same physical land features we see on Earth also exist on Mars. But the sheer size of some landforms on Mars dwarfs that of similar features on Earth. The table below compares many of Mars' conditions, specifications and features with those on Earth.
In the early years of ATM machines, there were many complaints with the ATMs. The machine is programmed to allow a customer to collect their money first and then take their card. However, this made many people forget their cards, and it was a worrying issue because anyone could have access to one's bank account. Now, in the UK, ATM machines have been reprogrammed so that customers will take their card first and then collect their money. As a result, it will be less likely for them to forget the money, since that was the main reason for them to use an ATM. Although, people sometimes still forget to take their money. It is more catastrophic to lose your card because it can access your bank account. The Western countries' women, especially those under 30 years old, are becoming more and more reluctant to give birth to babies. However, the male status in society remains strong in recent years. The birth rates increased during the 20th century, but it remains to decrease in the last 2 decades, reaching its historical low. In the year 2000, the birth rate remained at around 1%. There are even some negative birth rates in other countries. The birth rate dropped to its lowest point that has never been seen in history. It also has an impact on the male in society, especially the young man, and it might have some connection with the unemployment rate as well. Many parents communicate and educate their children in two languages, probably because they both know more than one language, or they come from different countries. Most of these parents think this can benefit their children's language learning. But actually, kids will get confused when their parents use different languages from each other to describe the same object. If one parent sticks to one language, and the other one sticks to another language, their children will not be confused anymore. In our survey, over 100 CEOs who had recently been through an acquisition or merger were asked which areas of their activities needed the most effort. As you can see, the most frequent response to this question was that information technology requires the most integration effort. According to 58% of those we surveyed, IT was the most time-consuming and needed the most work. This is understandable as many of the IT issues are extremely complex and the consequences of any change in IT can have a significant impact. The key is how quickly and effectively IT integration can be achieved, and there has to be a clear understanding of the consequences there may be of not getting it right. The two other areas requiring significant attention, sales, marketing, and business development on the one hand and financial management on the other, both were selected by 49% of the respondents. To be a successful entrepreneur, you should have good ideas, but the definition of a good idea varies depending on whom you ask. A great idea should have several features. Firstly, the great idea should be various and novel. Secondly, the great idea should be unique, which means no one has thought about it. Thirdly, it is essential for great ideas to be transformative and productive. All ideas are essentially a combination of other smaller ideas, but this doesn't mean they can't be unique. Merely copying doesn't make anything idiosyncratic. It's the individuality that one puts in which makes a concept stand out. Constant innovation leaves no room for stagnation and thus, adds on to the basic idea, effectively making it unique. Unique ideas are inspired by basic things, they are simply extensions of pre-existing notions. And, an idea or a concept is unique only when it transcends its predecessor and serves its purpose in a better and more precise way. Well, what I want to focus on now is climate change, more specifically on the fact that climate change is a result of human activities. Now there has been some disagreement regarding the extent to which human activity can be blamed for climate change, but I want to argue that there is evidence which clearly demonstrates that our own actions really are causing a genuine threat. The available evidence seems to indicate fairly conclusively that land and sea temperatures started to increase around 200 years ago. So, what's the significance of this? Well, 200 years ago roughly coincides with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the Northern Hemisphere. In other words, this was when our production of harmful gases really got going as a result of increased industrialization. Since that time our production of gases has accelerated due to the fact that not only has industry grown in size but it has also now spread to the Southern Hemisphere, indeed, most parts of the world. So, in the last 200 years, as industry has grown we can see a gradual rise in the temperatures which, to my mind, is sufficient proof of the damaging effect of our actions and needless to say it's an issue which we need to address. One soot, which comes from combustion of many different things, is black so it's a strong absorber. In fact it's second only to CO2 in terms of warming, so it's actually ahead of methane, which you hear a lot about. The interesting thing about soot and aerosols' impact on climate is that their lifetimes are so much shorter. So if we can reduce the soot we can make changes within months versus tens of years. It's not to say we should ignore the CO2 and the greenhouse gases, but it could buy us some time while we actually do the right strategies to reduce the greenhouse gases. Soot, which comes from combustion of many different things, is black so it's a strong absorber. In fact it's second only to CO2 in terms of warming, so it's actually ahead of methane, which you hear a lot about. The interesting thing about soot and aerosols' impact on climate is that their lifetimes are so much shorter. So if we can reduce the soot, we can make changes within months versus tens of years. It's not to say we should ignore the CO2 and the greenhouse gases, but it could buy us some time while we actually do the right strategies to reduce the greenhouse gases. Absolutely. There's a lot of interest in what forms those clouds. Why are those clouds there? Why do they stick around? At the center of every cloud drop is a particle. You can't grow a cloud drop without having a particle there for the water to condense on. The key questions that people have not directly addressed until very recently is what actually forms those clouds. And so the ones that you're looking at over the ocean, it turns out sea salt is a very effective nucleator for forming clouds, so there's a really good chance that those are loaded with sea salt. But as you go inland you start to have pollution come from all different kinds of sources, and so different sources form clouds more effectively than others. And we're trying to unravel which sources are actually contributing to the clouds. The clouds are incredibly important players in climate change in that they reflect the light back to space, and so they're keeping things much, much cooler than they would be if they weren't there. They also play a huge role in regional weather. So we're actually starting to see shifts where having more pollution input into the clouds is affecting weather patterns, and in particular it's actually reducing the amount of precipitation, so we're starting to see drought in areas with super high levels of air pollution. This is Hans Krebs, who in 1937 published a paper showing the sequence of chemical reactions, by which energy is released in individual cells. It is called the Krebs cycle, which some of you may remember from your chemistry course in your high school. Krebs is a wonderful example to me of how a scientist who is determined can overcome all kinds of human obstacles. Krebs's father constantly discouraged him and told him that he had just mediocre intelligence when never to anything important in his life, as a teenager. What Krebs remembers in his memoir, his father said to him, "You can't make a silk purse at a sow's ear." And later on, when Krebs studied with the great biochemist Otto Warburg, Warburg also told him the same thing. Not the same quote, but that he had only mediocre ability and would never be a great scientist. And we all hear about how important it is for parents to encourage their children, but sometimes the children will go on to do great things no matter what we say to them.
If you want to practice all of the new PTE questions using artificial intelligence on an online portal that has a similar marking to your real PTE exam, head over to masterpte.com.au to create a free account. Here, you can practice all 4 sections separately and receive instant feedback for all of your speaking, writing, reading, and listening. You can also view and compare your answers with others who have already succeeded in achieving a high score. Download 9090 Band's template for speaking, writing, and listening. Take mock test, receive instant result, overall feedback, and in-depth analysis which helps you pinpoint exactly where you lose points. Masterpte.com.au, the best PTE practice software in the world.